Hello. So today I am about to head out. Need to put a little makeup on my face, but then I am going to go to a new age spiritual convention thing with a coworker of mine, of all things. I have interesting thoughts on this as I've kind of evolved through. So for those of you who don't know, hi, my name is Sam, the Shadow Harvest YouTuber, a video every single day of the month for this lovely month. And I grew up in basically a more woo household. By that I mean new age thought was more so the predominant overview umbrella of my immediate family and household. Started kind of more like my dad's mom, and then clearly my dad's sister, and then my mom picked up as well. That was more so my household growing up situation than a solid Christian, Catholic, anything of that. Now there's definitely influences of that. It was always there because other family members, extended aunts, uncles, cousins, what have you, way more believe of the hard Christian stuff, so it was still very much present in my life. But I grew up way more of the crystals were besides beds. Your thoughts control your reality was a big one always said in my household, and those had their own reasons and stuff. And it's interesting, hello Zoom Zoom, that I would be able to grow up there and feel way more empowered, and I'm very grateful to have more of that experience, and thankfully a more encouragement from my parents to seek out a spiritual path that worked for me. They would discuss, of course, their beliefs. We would have those types of talks, but they encouraged me to read books, seek out different things. And even though they were a little about the witchcraft thing as it started, they definitely were around for the whole satanic panic thing of the 80s. There were concerns. But once they kind of got past that, it was much more of an open and accepting thing. But that does not mean that New Age thinking does not have its issues, and I very much have steered more and more and more away from it over time, or certain principles of it over time. They used to be a big element of my craft. So I am going to take you guys kind of along with me, show you a little bit of what I'm seeing when I go to this little convention thing, and then I guess discuss how my thoughts and feelings have evolved since kind of childhood and growing up in a new age household to now being a pagan witch, and how that has influenced me overall. So it's several days later now, but you know, we're gonna talk about that little convention and my slightly weird feelings about it. I don't know. All of the vendors there, there were some interesting people. There was a palm reader there that I got done. It was a bruja. She read my palms and had some very interesting things to say. And palm reading is one of the things that I have never really looked into. There was also a I'm not gonna be able to say this, or I have to look it up. How do you, Vedic astrology reader. He was clearly Indian, and he had the whole with like you to pull the chart and stuff like that. I would have loved to get in with him, but there was like a line at the door. Goodness only knows if that was even gonna happen, and I need to get home and like get my life together for the work week. So there were some interesting people there, but then there was just like a lot of other stuff there that I just really did not vibe with. I was raised in a much more new age household. That is where I came from more so. There were the Catholic and Southern Baptist influences and Armenian Orthodox influences as well. But the main thing that was in my immediate household, and then as part of discussions at the dinner table by my mom, my grandmother, and my father and all that stuff, was very more new age line of thinking. It was talks about how we create our own reality, ideas of manifesting, of, you know, visualizing as a way to bring something to you. My parents both had crystals and stuff around. And even if it wasn't a constantly talked about thing, like it wasn't like we were going to like meditation retreats or anything like that, but there was much more of that was the kind of the foundation of any sort of spiritual talks at home. I think with it, as I've evolved and grown in my past now overall, and I think a lot of it had to do with I just wasn't connecting with so much of it, because a lot of the ideas had this one overarching idea that there was still the one truth, and when you figure it out and you realize it's the background truth to all the other religions in the world, well then you truly understand how things are working. And anything that prescribes that they have the one truth, red flags everywhere. But that seemed to be a constant thing in anything I looked into spiritually when it came to the New Age side. So I think that was one of the reasons it always gave me the ick, and then I would fall off of it, fall back on, fall off of it, fall back on. And one good thing about my parents is, even though they very much had these New Agey beliefs, I was into exploring other religions and poking around. My mom bought me like a world's religions book type of deal. And because the popping on, popping off, and then getting into college and having this very like intellectual group of friends who are very much into researching and very more militant atheist, if anything, I kind of fell off of it entirely for a little while before again falling back into it, and just step by step getting closer and closer to witchcraft the more my curiosity evolved. Another thing that kind of just always rubbed me the wrong way, and I think it's one of the reasons it fell off of me so often, was along with the overarching truth, there was this lack of groundingness, at least with all of the types of ideas that I had been exposed to and were attempting to explore. There seemed to be this race in this life to awaken or to raise your vibration. It was this constant advancement rat race, and so it was level of almost like spiritual burnout. Like, you know, I would go through these stages of like meditating every day or doing like rush as if, because it was almost trying as hard as I could to escape the current world and current reality I was in. It was very much about ascending to the next level, always, and to awaken in this lifetime so you could then be able to manifest whatever you wanted and do all the things without having to fear the ills of the world. And I just don't connect with that right now, because I realized over time so often I felt ungrounded, unsecured in the current world that we are. Now I believe we're in the world that we are now, in this 3D reality, out in with the other peoples and the earths and all of the different things mixing around us, for at least, if chaos can have a reason, for the very thing of that existing within this is important, feeling grounded and secure in the now, in society. There is a importance to not constantly looking for the next otherworldly thing that will help you entirely escape from where we are now, if that makes sense. Whereas before it was very much an escapist thing. Like, if I can just focus on this thing and ignore all the other things going on, then I will become higher, more elevated, and in so many ways superior than all my other peers, all the other people around. And honestly, in so many ways, I almost felt like that was a weird teeter off from the weird Christianity thinking. It almost felt like if I can be the good spiritualist, it's the same way as like I can be the better Catholic, I can be the better Baptist, I can get closer to God. And the closer I am to God, then the higher I am above the rest of you menial folk. Like, that shit seemed a little too, it seemed too judgy. And even though now I do work with deities and this higher thing going on a bit, it doesn't feel that out of step, out of reach, so expansive. It feels much more of my lessons, and my main thing is all down here. It is more grounded, and there is a deep connectivity within that grounding thing that I was constantly missing before. So I think that's another reason why so much of that New Age lines of thinking just felt so shallow. Also, along with that, I think when it came to witchcraft, there was something, because there wasn't like that rat race to get to ascendant to such a level, because witchcraft and paganism for me has felt more grounded and much more of a long life thing. I think for me that also came from the Maiden Mother Crone, when I saw that concept, the idea that it would take me my whole life to really gain knowledge, and that long drudged day by day of experiencing and joy and taking my time in researching and really exploring things with true depth. I really tapped into that with witchcraft and understanding the academic explorative side of it, and knowing it would have to be a mix of exploring and trying and really poking out, and an allowance for mistakes, I guess, on that front. That allowed me to then realize how much depth and culture, and allowed me to, I think, expand much more into the teeny tiny minutia of all these different pieces. And so much of that meant then diving down even further and realizing where so many different ideas come from, where things have been taken from and then out of their context, knowing that I have the time to research it. And I still war with this now, the idea of like that I don't feel adequate enough because I don't know enough about every single freaking topic that has ever been mentioned in the occult. But I constantly just reassure myself and that like that's okay. We don't need to know all the things now. That's a whole part of the entire life's journey. Now they call me. Where was I? Oh, the chaos of attempting to film. But so yeah, I don't know. Overall, I think I evolved slowly but surely more to witchcraft because of that desire and ability to study more, see the in-depth, see the origins of things. And you know, it's kind of been exposed more and more as I've done more into Wicca and realizing even where it just seems to be a normal thing where people seem to be on this higher place and they like seem to pick and choose from which spiritualities they want to use things. And while some of that, I can see some of the benefit in that, where you're like, I want to use what ideas serve me and disregard those that don't. But there's definitely a level of like, if you're taking the thing entirely removed from the origin of it, I don't know how I feel about that. Like it does feel like you're losing some of the potency of it. It makes me think of, I remember when I first tried out a few yoga classes here or there, and one of the things I really loved was the studio that I went to. There was a Hindu woman who came and like did a session with one of the classes, and it went into some of the talks of the Hindu gods and kind of like talked us through the movements, and there was a story that kind of like went along with some of the flow of the poses. And I was super fascinated with the idea of like, oh wow, this flow is not just a flow of body movements to achieve a certain level of flexibility or connectivity or whatever. It's actually a story going through. Like that is so fascinating. And it really opened my eyes to a level of connectivity between the body and spiritual work. Like that was super fun and palatable and explorative, and I was so happy that I had that experience that just kind of happened upon. In the same way as like finding out about different types of meditations and finding their origin and really exploring those things and knowing that so many things have a deep connection to different cultures is, I think, important, and disregarding it entirely the way that so many new age lines of thought seem to almost encourage people to do, because you're trying to reach that higher ability. If it's all considered the same truth under one blanket, then disregarding where the little minutia pieces of where that thing came from seems to be encouraged. And like, no, there's importance in this culture, and oh, if we just like wipe out basically these brown people's lines of thoughts, I guess it gets weird like that so often. Yeah, and I guess it's that kind of like shallow picking and just like picking and plugging entirely together and entirely removing the context that I don't necessarily enjoy or vibe. I like the idea of exploring and using what works well for you, but you still give homage to the original thing. You should know the full context, or as much as you can, you know, like can't become an entire expert in a thing, but you should know more of the context of the culture and the people that stuff comes from. One of the things, someone mentioned it in the deity offering comments in below, and I love it, and it's a thing that I do all the time, is one of the reasons I give so much homage to my deities is by researching the people they come from, researching what cultures lifted them up. There was a fascinating video I saw recently talking about Persephone and how within the Greek planting calendar, there's a word for that, I'm not going to remember, but like the actual calendar of when the seeds and stuff were done, actually summertime is the fallow period for them, especially back in ancient Greece. So knowing that and knowing that that would then be the time that Persephone went to the underworld, I was like, wait a minute, like there are some things that are tied in with that. It's so important to look into that stuff. That's one of the reasons that for me with Sobek, it is a really important time around August, because that's kind of around the time that like the Nile floods, and so it would have been a more fertile time for ancient Egyptians. Knowing these contexts and these pieces can really help feed and inform you more about your stuff. And I really enjoy that, at least in the pagan and witchcraft circles that I have happened upon, for the most part, more in-depth study, more looking into things, finding out more and more and more about the details, about the minutia, about the day-to-day, about the ground dirt work is so not only really put out there, but highly encouraged, because I think that it does give you a good foundation and it gives you meat to really like sink your teeth into, that makes you feel way more connected overall to what you're doing and what you're feeding into, and I think gives your overall magic a lot more oomph. So anyway, that was just kind of my 2 cents. As always, I guess this is kind of a weird coffee and cauldrons, even though there was no coffee. It was more me just kind of talking about how, you know, going to that fair was much more of a interesting exploration, I guess, for me than anything else. So anyway, this is Youtober, so I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.